Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Molly. I'm a knitter based out of the San Francisco Bay Area where I live with my fiance and our cat Lola. And on this channel, I talk all about knitting and whatever other crafty endeavors, mostly crochet. I'm anticipating some embroidery soon, anything that strikes my fancy, but mostly knitting. First of all, Happy New Year. I'm going to talk all about my 2025 Make 9 today and a little bit about some other goals that I have around knitting, some carryovers from my 2024 Make 9, basically what I kind of am hoping to accomplish in the year ahead. This does not include the items from my winter planning, although those are things that I anticipate carrying over into the new year if I'm not finishing them. I think I'll probably finish 2 things from that list, maybe 3. I'm filming this before the new year, obviously, but a little earlier because I'm going away for the holidays. When you see this, I will not be in California, and it seemed easier to do it when I have all of my yarn laid out. My bed is right here. All my yarn is just laid out on the bed that I'll be talking about today, and it just seemed easier to do this here. I'm not totally sure how many of my winter goals I will have finished by the time 2025 rolls around. Those will carry over. If you want to know more about those, I will make sure to link that video up above. I'm also going to make another video all about everything I knit in 2024. That will be coming later once January 1st actually hits and I have returned to California from the holidays. I want to make sure that I will be able to talk about everything that I actually knit and worked on in the year, so I'm waiting on that. But I do want to talk about how I did in 2024 with my plans and which of those things I'll be carrying over into 2025 from my Make 9 specifically. To jump right into it, I've knit 4 patterns from my 2024 Make 9, so that's a rate of less than 50%. I'm hoping to cast on 1 or 2 remaining ones and maybe finish 1 or 2 before the end of the year. So make sure to check back when I do my 2024 roundup video to see how many I actually did. But I'm not doing the best in terms of meeting those goals. But I did finish 4 things: the Moonset Pullover by Ozetta, the Roll Neck Tank by Hannah Singleton, the Coloring Book Tea by Amy Scher, which is something I ended up knitting instead of the Cozy Classic Light by Jessie May because that pattern fit my gauge better. I'm just going to count that because it is a raglan and it used the yarn I was planning to use. And the Slightly Sassy V, also a pattern by Amy Scher. I plan to have cast on the Port Sweater and the Lunati by Ozetta and Carissa, respectively, before the end of the year. I don't know how that will go, what I'll finish, if either of those. So again, check back. In the end, I knit about half of the things that I was planning to knit in 2024. I did attempt to make some of the other things. In terms of what I didn't finish, I'll start with the Elf Mail by Danny Miga. That is a pattern I was planning to make with 2 yarns that I swatched together using the broken seed stitch from the Elf Mail, and it just didn't really look that good. I think the colors were not high enough contrast, really. I took a photo in black and white and I literally couldn't tell the difference between the 2 colors. So I think that might have been part of the issue. It just didn't look very good, and I don't want to just be knitting things to say that I knit them to check them off a box. If things don't work out, I don't want to knit them. So that is a pattern that I'm going to scrap. I have bought many 2-ply yarns in an attempt to figure out what to do with the yarn that I was going to be using for those patterns, and you can check out my previous videos to hear more about that. Another pattern I didn't finish was the Ardea by Ksenia Naidion. That is a pattern from a Pom Pom magazine edition that I do own. I do think I want to make that in 2025. The yarn that I was planning to use for that is Barocco Modern Cotton DK. It's something that has been languishing in my stash for forever, basically. I think I've had it since 2019. I was kind of in this weird buying streak. I bought a lot of cotton for a while because I was thinking that I would prefer to knit with cotton living in a slightly warmer climate. That's not really true. And I didn't have a pattern in mind that I can remember when I bought that yarn. So I think I still want to try to make the Ardea, but it's not something that I will be making in the first like quarter of the year, certainly. I do think I get a weird bug to knit warm clothes, like winter garments, in summer. And I mean, when you knit summer garments in summer, a lot of times you don't have time to wear them. So I think that's one of my problems with a lot of more like cottony projects, is I kind of miss the window in which I actually feel like knitting with it. So I'm hoping that I can get myself to make this pattern during that window next year. Another pattern that I plan to make was the Alley Sweater Light by Sarah Opie. The yarns I had planned were this Bare Capretta Superwash by Knit Picks as my main color. This is a Merino Cashmere Nylon blend, 80-10-10, and it is 460 yards per 100 grams. And I was going to hold it with this skein from Waifu Yarns in the colorway Daegu Dreams. This is their basic sock base. I think it might have been renamed, but it's 85% superwash merino, 15% nylon, and 438 yards. I think this is coming off maybe slightly darker on camera than it actually is. Ultimately, I think this is a project that I will leave in 2024 unfinished. It's not really about the pattern. It's not about the pattern at all. It's a little bit about the yarn. I really am excited to use that Waifu Yarns skein. I bought it, I think when they did a trunk show at Black Squirrel in 2022 or something. Maybe it was 2021, so I've been holding on to it for a while, trying to find the right thing to do with it, and I still don't really know. For one, I just finished a natural colored sweater, like a whitish sweater, my coloring book tee. I don't know if I need another. I'm a very clumsy person. I don't know if I'm going to like the colors swatch together. I may swatch this color combo at some point and see, and if I really like it, especially with the stitch pattern from the Alley Sweater Light, maybe I'll go for it. But I don't know if I really need another white sweater. I don't know if this is inspiring me. I can probably find a better pairing for the Waifu Yarn skein that I have. I don't know what. It does have a lot of colors in it. Maybe I'll just use it on its own and make like a little shawl or scarf, or maybe even socks, which wouldn't probably be something I would do, but maybe. I'm going to hold off on that project for now. It's not a priority. I think using the Waifu Yarns is a bit of a priority, so maybe my first step before I go and do something with it is to swatch the stitch pattern from the Alley sweater and see if I like it. And then maybe I'll do it. But this is not a project that I'm married to for 2024. So I'm going to carry over the Port Sweater, Luna Tea, and Ardea into 2025, at least assuming I don't finish those patterns. I definitely won't finish all of them. And I'm going to be leaving the Elf Mail and the Alley Sweater Light for the moment. Perhaps I'll revisit those patterns at a later date. We'll see. I do, though, generally feel okay about my 2024 Make 9 not being even close to finished. And I did knit a lot more than 9 projects last year. You'll see how many, I'll see how many in a couple weeks. But I do try to do a combo of knitting projects that I've had in my mind for a long time and knitting things that I feel really inspired to knit. So if I just bought some yarn that I'm really excited to use, or sometimes it's yarn I've had in my stash for a long time and I'm like, I'm really excited to start picking up those special skeins and knitting with them. And I want to give myself the freedom to do that. I also want to feel free to allow myself to not want to knit something anymore. There's sometimes patterns that you think you really want to knit, or yarn you really want to use, and then when the time comes, you realize that it's not really something that fits your interests anymore. And that's okay. I don't ever want to knit something because I feel like I have to. At least not for myself. You know, I don't do a lot of gift knitting. I think sometimes you pick things you're not in love with and you kind of force yourself to knit it because your recipient will like it, whatever. But in terms of knitting things for my own wardrobe, I don't want to knit something I'm not going to wear, that isn't my style, with yarn that I don't actually like the feel or look of. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that pattern or that yarn, it's just maybe not my current style or something that I'm currently drawn to. I think that's okay. I want to make sure that I am stopping to think about whether I should make something and not just blindly follow whatever plans I lay out for myself because it's what I said I would do. As always, that means the patterns for my 2025 Make 9 might get done, might not get done. My main goal, as I believe I said in 2024, is to use the yarns that I'm talking about, more or less. I might add a yarn or two to some of these. I might take a yarn away from a project. I might end up using a yarn in a different project, and that's fine. But my main goal is kind of to use these 9 yarns, and my intention right now, and for a while, generally these are things I've been thinking about for a while, is to use them in the projects that I talk about right now. So the first pattern I want to knit is a shawl. It's the only shawl on my list. This is the Book Club Shawl by Gabriella Treminio. I will be using Jaggerspun Zephyr for this. Jaggerspun Zephyr is this yarn right here. I have 4 skeins, although they are frogged from another project. They're over there in a bag. I just picked out the one nice skein that I have. This is a 50% wool, 50% merino yarn, and there are 248 yards per 100 grams. And I have the colorway Sable. So if you've been around a while, you might remember that I used this yarn to make a Gib pullover by Andrea Mowry, which is a pattern we'll revisit in a second, but it turned out way too big and drapey, and I think I did a really bad job, ultimately, pairing this yarn with that pattern. This is a very, I mean, it's 50% silk. Silk is a much drapier fabric. It kind of blocks big and stays big, and that's not really the vibes of the Gib. For a while, I was kind of averse to making a shawl out of this yarn. I don't necessarily know why, but I've decided that that's exactly what I'm going to do because I think that it will fit the yarn perfectly. The Book Club shawl is a triangle shawl. It's knit corner to corner, and it has these beautiful cable details. There are 2 sizes, a 53-inch wingspan and a 78-inch wingspan. It says that it will use 320 to 750 yards of yarn. So I have 4 skeins, 248 yards each, almost 1,000 yards. I should have way more than enough. I imagine that this pattern is probably knit just like making increases and then decreases whenever you feel like it. I don't know for sure. I haven't bought it yet. It's possible if I feel like I want to that I will use all of the yarn that I have in this shawl and just do extra repeats if that is a feasible thing to do. But if it doesn't seem feasible, or I think that the shawl is just getting too big that way, I could probably just use the extra yarn in something like a soapy scarf. The next pattern that I want to knit is the Gib. It's the Gib 1 by Andrea Mowry. I believe the Gib 1 is the more feminine fit and the Gib 2 is the more masculine fit. I only have the Gib 1. I can't tell you exactly what the differences are, but I will be using this yarn, Simply Wool Worsted from Knit Picks, and this is the colorway Wilhelmina. There are 218 yards and 100 grams per skein, and I just untwisted this skein. It's wool. It's 100% wool. In addition to reusing the yarn that I made my previous Gib in, I'm going to be using the pattern again and making it in a yarn that I think is more suitable. The Gib is an all-over textured raglan pattern. It has cable details in the raglan stitches. I think it looks really nice. It's a worsted weight pattern. The gauge is 20 stitches and 32 rows over a 4-inch square. It comes in 9 sizes between 32 inches and 64 inches, and it's meant to have 2 to 6 inches of positive ease. I'm a huge fan of textured knits. I think that they look really nice, and I did find this pattern generally pretty enjoyable to knit, and before I blocked it, I liked the look of it on me. After I blocked it was kind of a different story. I'm currently working a version of this yarn in my September sweater. It's a twist version, not this version, which you can hear me talk about elsewhere, but the yarn is, I think, something that will be really good for this project. It's non-superwash, it's a little bit stickier, just like more rustic. I think it'll have sort of that hold, it'll hold its shape better, it'll be a more like structured garment than it ended up being in the wool silk blend. This pattern does involve quite a bit of purling. more purling than knitting, if I recall, which isn't my favorite. I don't hate purls the most out of anyone I know, but I don't love them. I also remember the sleeve decreases getting a little bit wonky when you try to keep the texture, but I don't think that either of those things are things that will keep me from knitting the pattern again, because I just really like the look of it, especially just the combination of the texture and the raglan cables. So hopefully this is something that I don't sleep on for too long into the year. I also want to make the Strya. That is a cardigan knit in all over half fisherman's rib, I think. It has a V-neck, and you knit these very narrow stripes in 4 different colors on the sweater. I think in my November podcast episode, I talked a lot about acquiring all of the different yarns that I plan to use in this, but all of the yarns are different colorways of Rosa, Pomar, Mondim. These are the colors I have planned. This will be my main color. This is colorway 117. And then the contrast colors I have are C574, B580, 113, and 111. So Rosa Pomar Mondim is a 100% Portuguese wool yarn, and there are 421 yards per 100 gram skein. The pattern is knit at a gauge of 24 stitches and 50 rows in 4 inches of half fisherman's rib, and it comes from 10 sizes from 34 3/4 inches to 61 inches, and it's intended to have -2 to +4 inches of ease. I'm hoping to get some more cardigans in my wardrobe in general. That's not necessarily reflected in this Make 9, which I don't really have a lot of yarns that I'm planning to make cardigans in at the moment. And I feel like the type of cardigan I generally want is pretty specific. I'd like something that's kind of workwear-y, which I don't necessarily know if this will be, although my office is pretty casual, so probably fine for my current work. I just really love the way that a half fisherman's rib looks, or a brioche looks. I mostly just hope that these colors will look good together. I think sometimes my eye for colors, as I mentioned with my elf mail, can be a little bit iffy, but I'm really hoping that this will work out. Otherwise, maybe I'll have to grab some additional colors and figure out what to do with all of the extra Mondim that I've picked up. Keeping with the Mondim, my next plan is the Lento. I'm going to make this though with Rosa Pomar Mondim in this colorway M77, and then Camarose Midnut Sol in the colorway, I think, Lis Mint, yeah, which I believe is light mint. It is a 54% baby alpaca, 36% lyocell, 10% merino wool yarn, so a little bit different, but it is this lace weight fluff, and there are 200 meters per 25 gram ball. I've spoken about this one recently as well. This is yarn that I also acquired ahead of my November podcast. This pattern is a loose knit raglan pullover. It has sort of, I guess, like 3/4-ish, maybe bracelet length sleeves on the model in the pattern photos. And it's a very popular one, I think. It's kind of is like a, I think of this one and the ranunculus in this realm of like loose gauge, fingering weight-ish patterns that you make to have like a floaty pullover. The gauge is 15 stitches and 21 rows, is 4 inches in stockinette, so pretty loose for holding together a mohair or fluff of some kind and a fingering weight yarn, but that is what the intention is. This pattern comes in 9 sizes from 38.5 to 67.25 inches with an intended ease of about 5 inches. Basically, when I saw this Mondim, I just kind of fell in love with the colors. I think the colors are really fun. I'm a sucker for like cool colors. I love like teals and cobalt blues. I love a purple. So it kind of hit a lot of the colors that I really like. I know maybe you wouldn't think that given that I'm wearing like an ochre today, but that's fine. Then I was like, maybe I can pair it with somebody, kind of tone down some of the color changes, see what happens, and I'm intrigued by the blend of yarns in the Midnut Sol, so I'm hoping that this will work out well. Maybe the yarns will look really terrible together and I'll have to go back to the drawing board. But I'm excited to try this. I'm excited to try this yarn and try this pattern because I know it's really popular and I'm hoping that it works out. My next pattern is the Sea Glass sweater by Wool and Pine. And I have a variety of different yarns I'd like to make this in. They are looking a little worse for wear. Is this all one? Oh boy. So I have this Clouborn yarn. This is Clouborn Superwash Merino Worsted Twist in, I think it's Charcoal Heather. This is a discontinued yarn, so unfortunately not available anymore as far as I know. I also have Malabrigo Rios in, I believe, the colorway Cosmos. Earl Grey Fiber Co. in the colorway Hydrangea. This is the Chai Worsted base. And Dream in Color Classy in African Gray. That feels wrong. I think I bought a different yarn around the same time called African Gray. And I might use different yarns. So I've had these yarns in my stash for ages. I had a variety of intentions with them. Let me hold these up together. I think I wound this yarn when my ball winder was really struggling, so I think I'm going to put this aside for hopefully immediately after I finish this to do something with to try to fix this. This yarn I think originally intending to make a Stockholm slipover in, but I never did it. And then I was looking at a different pattern that included 1x1 stripes, or like single row stripes. That's what I'm looking for. I tried it a few different ways and I used these 4 colors, but I didn't love it the way that it was turning out. I don't think it's that I don't like the color combination. I think the 1x1 striping is what's not really working for me. So I'm hoping that I will like them better in this form. I believe I have 3 skeins of the Charcoal Heather yarn. This horrible rat's nest right here. Everything is kind of in pieces because I've knit things and frogged them, so I have more than just what I have here in like little ball form, which is annoying, but whatever. I might try to use a different color. Like this is my main color. I might try to add another color or 2 in addition to these 3. I might take out the gray and try to, like, I don't know, get a different color. Another yarn I do have in my stash is this Dream in Color Classy with Cashmere and the colorway Milky Spite, which I might try to add into the mix or use instead of the gray. I don't know how to, there we go. That's kind of, I don't know. But basically, the main impetus for this, let me put like most of these yarns down. The main impetus for this is to use this Earl Grey Chai Worsted Hydrangea. So this is, I believe they were local to the Bay Area and they are not any longer. And they're also not dyeing anymore. I believe they have like a little bit of yarn left in stock, but they're not dyeing anymore. This was a base exclusive to Black Squirrel. I really loved this like bright blue color. There are some purple flecks. There were some skeins of this yarn that had much more like white, like a lot more light areas. But I just really liked this colorway and I spent a while trying to find yarns to pair with it and I was struggling. I think my hope was that I could travel to different yarn stores in like 2021, 2022 while I was just on my regular travels. But I wasn't really finding worsted weight superwash merino yarns that would look good with this. I didn't bring it with me, but like the base that I was kind of looking for was not something that I was finding in a lot of these stores. So my main goal is to use this yarn. If I can use it with those, and I think I can use it with at least some of those yarns, that's my hope. But I really want to put this special skein into something. It's been languishing in my stash for a while, and I think it's really pretty. And I think that the sea glass will be fun. I'm making a sea glass hat right now, and I'm really enjoying that. I think 1x1 color work is super fun, so I think that this is something I will enjoy making, although because I will definitely be using more than 2 colors like I am on my hat, the ends might destroy me. But I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. I'm just hoping that this also works out. Next up, I have the City Limits Light. That's a pattern by Ravelry, and I have 3 yarns to use in it. First off is Schwedenroth yarns, which is a German dyer. This is the luxury sock base, and it's 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and 100 grams is 425 meters or 459 yards. This is the colorway Sage Vintage. I got this yarn at Beautiful Knitters in London. Then I have these Dye Bath Deli Sock minis. This is the colorway Robin's Egg, and I got 5 minis, all of the same color. This base is 85 meters and 20 grams, and 85 meters is 93 yards. And like I said, I have 5. They didn't have big skeins of this, or I would have bought one. And the last thing I have is this Ching Fiber sock yarn in the colorway Denim, or Dashing Fingering, sorry. Yeah, the Dashing Fingering base. And this is 100% Superwash Ultrafine Merino. It is 100 grams and 400 meters, which I think is about 430, 440 yards. I thought I had a different base. My plan is to make a fade like this, more or less. I've talked about buying these yarns and my trip to the UK a little bit, and my intention has been to make a fade out of them. The City Limits Light by Ravelry is a raglan pullover. It's knit top down, and it has a fade built into it, which I think she has the instructions for within the pattern. I believe she has instructions for fades elsewhere, not in the pattern. I could obviously try to attempt a fade with a different pattern and just add the fade in myself. That's definitely not like necessarily beyond my abilities, although I've never tried a fade quite like this before with 3 like very distinct colors. But I like this pattern. I think I like the fit of it. It has kind of a sweatshirty fit. It has what looks kind of like a pearl bump texture in the raglan stitches, which continues down the body, and I just like the look of it. This pattern is knit at a gauge of 24 stitches and 32 rows over 4 inches, and it's offered in sizes from 6 to 12 months to a 68-inch chest, so you can knit it for all the way from babies to adults. It's modeled with 4 inches of ease in the pattern photos, and I think that's probably about what I would like to attempt, as I think I said with every color combination so far, and a lot of these involve very elaborate color combos, not necessarily color work. I don't think any of this is elaborate color work, but it does involve a lot of combining colors, which hopefully I'm going to get better at this year. If all of these projects fail, I'll refine my skills, but I'm just really hoping this fade works. I think when I look at it, it seems like it'll go okay. Fingers crossed, just like they are with everything else, but I'm excited to use these yarns. Our trip to the UK in 2024 was a lot of fun. I had a great time. I'd love to remember it through my knitting and have the sweater to remember it by before it gets way later. Like, I went to London and other parts of the UK in 2022, and I have quite a few yarns I still haven't used, and I don't really want that to happen with these yarns. Although I will use those 2022 yarns as well, I swear. So it's fine if this doesn't work, but I'm hoping that I can somehow incorporate these 3 yarns into a single project that allows me to remember kind of the 3 main cities that we visited during our trip. The 7th pattern is the Market Henley by Claire Jackson of Perfectly Knotted, and I will be using Biches and Bouches Le Petit Lamb's Wool in the colorways Light Gray and Bonbon or Candy. So this is light gray, this is Bonbon. And I believe you can see probably that the Candy is like a lightish gray kind of base with multicolored sort of ply thing throughout. It's hard to explain, but it's pretty subtle. I bought these, I believe, at Uncommon Threads in Los Altos during the Bay Area yarn crawl. They only had 2 skeins of the candy, and I wanted to use it because I thought it looked really pretty. And I was like, maybe what else can I do with it? Maybe I can pair it with this gray. And kind of my initial plan was to do like helical knitting, kind of like single stripes to blend the 2 yarns together. I ended up buying extra yarn, and the candy / bonbon color was sold out everywhere. So I currently have 4 skeins of the light gray and 2 of the bonbon. So I will have to figure out how I'm going to incorporate the colors a little bit more creatively. Maybe like 2 rows, then 1 row. We'll figure it out. This yarn is 100% lamb's wool and 50 grams per ball. And there are 270 yards or 248 meters per ball. So it's a very light fingering, although it does fluff up, I would say, a little bit on blocking. I used it in a different project, but I did hold it with a mohair during that project. So we'll see. I do think that it's possible I will have to rethink this pattern depending on how the swatching goes for these yarns, because it is a very light fingering. The Market Henley is an all over waffle stitch Henley that I really like the look of. I've wanted to knit a Henley for a while. This one is also drop shoulder, which I'm pretty excited about. Every other sweater pattern I've talked about so far is a raglan, which I would say is probably my favorite sweater construction to knit, but it's always nice to have a little bit of variety. This sweater is top down as well, so I won't be worried about running out of yarn, although I don't know if that's a worry I super need to have now that I bought the 2 extra balls of the light gray. The gauge of this sweater in waffle stitch is 26 stitches and 36 rows over 4 inches. It comes in sizes 32 inches to 72 inches, and it has options for waist shaping if you don't want a boxier fit like the pattern has without the shaping. It's designed to have 4 to 8 inches of positive ease, and I'm basically just craving something different in my wardrobe. I love texture. I like the look of texture, and most of the time I enjoy knitting it. I think it would be a lot of fun to make this pattern, and I'm kind of hoping this yarn works out. Otherwise, I'll definitely be using this yarn this year, but I might try to find a different way to use this pattern because it's already in my library, so that's just a nice perk. The 8th pattern on my list is the Skyline Tee by Tori Yu. We're moving out of pullovers and into my final 2 tops, which are like a tee and a sleeveless top. And the Skyline Tee is a pattern by Tori Yu, and I'm going to be using this yarn. This is Woolen Works fingering sock yarn. It is an 80% extra fine Australian Superwash Merino, 20% nylon. It is 100 grams and 400 meters or 437 yards, and I have the colorway Birthday Balloons. This is a yarn I also got during the yarn crawl, like a couple of the rest of these. I got it at Firebird Yarns in San Francisco, and I believe they said when I was there that this was the first time that Woolen Works yarn had been available to purchase in North America, as they're a dyer from Australia. So not something that you see as often, Australian dyers here in the US. I think this will look really nice with this pattern, and I just really like the look of this pattern as it is. It has a saddle shoulder construction, and the saddle shoulders are ribbed, and then the ribbing continues throughout the rest of the sleeve on the top. And I think that's a really cool look. I've done, I think, 2 saddle shoulders before, although one was like half saddle shoulder, half raglan. I find the saddle shoulder to be a really fun and interesting construction. I've enjoyed working it, and I do think that it gives like an interesting and kind of nice fit from the patterns that I've knit. I think it eliminates, from my experience, a little bit of the problem you have with raglans and circular yokes, where like when you lift your arm up, the whole sweater really dramatically raises because it's all been knit in one piece. Although the extent to which my sweaters do that are raglans and circular yokes definitely varies anyway. I'm always excited to continue trying new or newer to me techniques, so I'm excited to try this one again. This is a pattern that comes in 9 sizes from 34 to 66 inches, and it's recommended to have 4 to 6 inches of ease. The gauge is 25 stitches in 33 rows over 4 inches in stockinette. I just think this shirt looks really polished and nice, and that it would be a good addition to my wardrobe. I'm excited to try this yarn because I think it's really pretty. The last pattern on my list is the Tonight Top by Lily Kate France. I plan to use Knitting for Olive Lavender Blue. This is the Merino base, and it's 100% extra fine merino. It is 50 grams per ball and 250 meters, and I have 3 balls of this color. I got this in Oxford, I believe, at Oxford Yarn Store, where I also bought the Ching fiber for my City Limits light. At the time, I think this colorway might actually be available in a bunch of stores near me now, but at the time it was a bit more rare. It's fine. I wanted this color. I got it. I love a bluey purple. I'm happy with it. But it is funny because for the longest time, Knitting for Olive was not really available near me in store. Then Black Squirrel started to carry it, and Imagine It, which has their original shop in San Francisco, carried it. It was a little bit of a trek for me, but then they opened up a store in Berkeley as well. So there's 2 stores in Berkeley now that carry Knitting for Olives, and it's kind of funny to me that I went all the way to the UK and got Knitting for Olive, but it might be cheaper there. I'm not sure. I hope to make the Tonight Top with this. That is a sleeveless, like turtleneck, mock neck top. It's knit top down, and it has a gauge of 26 stitches and 32 rows over 4 inches with an intended 1 to 3 inches of positive ease. And the finished sizes are 31 inches to 63 inches. I just really like the look of this shirt. As I was kind of mentioning with the Skyline tee, I'm looking for knits that are like slightly more polished in my wardrobe. This particular top I could imagine potentially wearing in the summer, like to work, with a blazer or a cardigan to wear in the office. I think going back a while, some of my plans have involved knitting for a more professional environment. Now, I don't work in a particularly fancy office. I am kind of still a trainee. I got a PhD, for those of you who don't know, so I'm a postdoc right now. Work life is very much still evolving. I'm not at the point like a lot of people in their 30s where I have a more permanent position. I'm still kind of evolving my career. As a result, I mean, I don't need things that are particularly formal right now. Science is not a particularly formal field as it is. I also only go in once a week, so I don't need like a bunch of really fancy clothes. That said, I do have a good amount of conference travel planned. I think that I often feel a lot more confident when I'm wearing things I've made, and I think that this top has that polished look that will suit a more professional environment a little bit better. And I'm really hoping that this yarn isn't like just slightly too thin. If it is, I may end up picking up a mohair to pair with it, hopefully in the same color. Hopefully I would be able to find that. But I'm just hoping that my gauge will match and everything will work out great. So that's my make 9 for the year. Those are the patterns I want to make, and perhaps more importantly, the yarns I want to use. I only really have one other goal, and that is to use my yarn. I know if you've been here a while, you've probably heard me say we're gonna move many times, and it hasn't happened yet. I'm still living in the same place I was when I started this channel, but my fiance and I are getting married. We are at a point where we definitely need more space. We'd love to have a second bedroom right now, mostly just for space reasons and storage reasons. And we'd love to move somewhere where we could get a second cat. There's a few reasons we'd like to move. Space is the primary reason, but commute is potentially another. When it comes to moving, I'd rather lug around finished knits than a bunch of yarn. I don't hate the idea of lugging around some yarn, but I want to make sure that I'm not just adding to my stash without using what I have. Haven't been too bad at that. There's definitely times I'm kind of in a high yarn buying period, and that's okay. In 2025, I want to use my yarn. My goal is to have a net negative influx of yarn. So I want to use more yarn than I am bringing in. I'm not going to try to do like a no buy or anything. And I'm not really sure exactly how to operationalize this. I think I'll measure it in grams, and I think I'll measure it in finished projects. But there's obviously a few kind of issues with this, and that like 100 grams of worsted weight yarn knits up much more quickly than 100 grams of fingering weight yarn. And if I'm measuring this by the month, a sweater sometimes takes more than a month, but like in theory, I have knit up a couple 100 grams of yarn while working on a sweater, even if it's in progress. So I might make these more like quarterly goals so I have time to finish some projects, but I think I'll probably figure that out later. I mostly just want to end the year with less yarn than I started with. I hope to do like a big audit of my yarn at some point. I really love those videos and stuff where people just lay out all the yarn they have and like go through all of it. But I'm not really in a space mentally, physically. Like, I don't know if I really have the room to do that physically in our apartment in a way that like would be helpful for me. Not in like a, I have more yarn than floor space in my apartment. I don't think that's true. I'm just not really ready to do that. I'm also not really ready to know exactly how much yarn I have, but I'm thinking, as I'm saying this, that something that might be a good idea is to go through like a single vessel of yarn, box, bag, bin, basket, whatever, of yarn each month. Maybe like add it to my Ravelry stash, catalog it, and then try to be really honest with myself about what I will use and not use. Like if there's anything that I'm just not going to use, and I'm willing to say that to myself, I'm willing to admit it, just get rid of it. Sell it or give it away locally or to whoever. I think that's actually a good idea. And that way I'll be able to catalog all the yarn I have, track all the yarn I have, and I can also show you all, but I don't have to do this like big spread. So I'm feeling good about that. So yeah, next year I'm going to do monthly yarn audits of a box of yarn until I finish all of the boxes. And in the meantime, I will also try to buy fewer grams of yarn than I am using on a quarterly basis. That's my tentative plan. I'll keep you updated throughout the year on how that's going. I'm excited because I think this year, more than previous years, I have more like bulkier weight projects. I don't tend to knit much with anything heavier than DK or at that loose of a gauge. Because I live in a relatively temperate climate, I don't do a huge amount of like worsted weight sweaters or bulkier. This year I do have a good amount of like looser gauge, bulkier patterns that I want to knit. It's kind of the yarn that I have been sleeping on in my stash. And I think that that will help me whittle down my stash a little bit faster in terms of the gram amount that I have. So that's all that I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed listening to my big plans for 2025. Hopefully I'll be able to follow through on at least half of them. I would say that would be nice. I'd love to hear what your crafting goals are for next year, be it patterns you want to make, yarns you want to use, buying limits, whatever of that variety that you have for yourself, anything. I personally love making goals and planning. I'm not necessarily always good at following through, as you've heard, but I like the act of doing that. I like the kind of structure that gives me, and I really enjoy hearing what other people's goals are too. So if you want to chat, please feel free to leave me a comment and we can talk about what our plans are. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. I make videos about knitting and crafting every week or two, and I will be having that 2024 everything I knit for myself roundup coming in the very near future. So if you want to make sure that's in your feed, definitely subscribe. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Happy New Year, and I'll see you next time. Bye.